As the war room door clicked shut behind Rose, she took a slow, steadying breath, rolling her shoulders. The fight had settled, but the embers were still there, smouldering under her skin. She could still feel Lyra's presence, still hear that damn smug voice in her ears. But this wasn't about her. Not anymore. She turned toward Gunner's office, knowing damn well this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. The hallway was quiet, her boots the only sound against the reinforced flooring. When she reached his door, she didn't knock, didn't hesitate, just pushed it open and stepped inside. Gunner was already at his desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed, waiting. Not a good sign. The door clicked shut behind her and she stood there, arms crossed, mirroring his stance. "Let me guess," she said dryly. "This is the part where you tell me to behave?" Gunner arched a brow. "You call that behaving?" Rose's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "I could have done worse." "You almost did." A tense silence settled between them, thick with unspoken words. Gunner studied her for a long moment, then exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, I'm not asking you to like her. I don't like her. But I need to know. Are you going to be a problem?" Rose clenched her fists, then forced them to relax. Think, not react. Finally, she let out a breath, her voice tight. "Number, I won't be a problem." Gunner gave her a long, measured look. "You sure about that?" Rose didn't answer right away. Instead, she dropped her gaze to the floor for a second, then back up, her voice quieter. "She drugged me," she admitted. "Left me chained at Draven's feet like a goddamn offering." The words burned coming out, like she hadn't let herself say them out loud before. Gunner's jaw flexed, his grip tightening on his arms. He already knew Lyra had betrayed Rose, but not like that. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Damn it!" Rose smirked humorlessly. "Yeah, that about sums it up." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Gunner let out a breath, leveling his gaze at her. "I can't afford you two tearing each other apart," he said, voice firm but not unkind. "You keep your distance, she keeps hers. That's the deal." Rose's smirk returned, sharp as a knife. "You think she's going to follow rules?" Gunner gave her a flat look. "I don't give a shit what she does, you will." Rose exhaled through her nose. "Fine. For now." Gunner studied her for another beat, then shifted gears. "I've got something else for you." Rose raised a brow. "Oh, good. More fun." He ignored the sarcasm. "It's about the celestial gem." Rose straightened slightly. "Argoz." Gunner nodded. "I need you to bring her here. We're going to talk to her about what we found out." Rose hesitated. Argoz didn't trust Easy. She was skittish on a good day. After months of being hunted, she'd earned that right. "You sure pulling her in like this is a good idea?" she asked. Gunner gave her a knowing look. "That's why I'm sending you. She trusts you." Rose exhaled, rolling her shoulders. "Yeah, that tracked." She nodded. "All right, I'll get her." She turned for the door, but as she reached for the handle, Gunner spoke again. "Rose." She paused. His voice was quieter this time. "I don't know what Lyra's game is, but I do know one thing. You survived without her." Rose swallowed, then nodded once. "Yeah, I did." And with that, she walked out, leaving the past where it belonged, behind her. Rose walked through the halls of the workshop, her mind still tangled with thoughts of the past, of Lyra, of everything. But she pushed it all aside, focus on the now. The mess hall was still in ruins. Tables overturned, dishes shattered, the lingering smell of scorched wood from Rose's less-than-controlled fury still clung to the air. And Bianca? Oh, Bianca was not pleased. Argoz had gotten roped into helping clean. Not because she'd done anything, but because Caleb had opened his mouth, made a smart-ass remark, and somehow gotten them all dragged into it. Evelyn sighed as she stacked broken plates into a bin. "I can't believe you thought that was a good idea." Caleb, sweeping debris into a pile, scoffed. "What? I just said maybe the place needed a remodel." A knife thunked into the wooden beam next to his head. He went dead silent. Bianca stood nearby, arms crossed, holding another knife, her expression dangerous. "What was that?" she asked sweetly. Caleb, without looking, reached up, plucked the knife from the wood, and handed it back to her. Nothing. Bianca humphed and went back to cleaning. Argoz, meanwhile, had been quietly minding her own business, wiping down a mostly unbroken table. She wasn't involved in the fight, didn't care about Rose's dramatic love feud, and, frankly, didn't want to get on Bianca's bad side. But apparently that wasn't enough to save her. Bianca turned to her. "You," she said, pointing. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Argoz blinked. "Me? What the hell did I do?" Bianca gestured around the destroyed mess hall. "Your people, your mess." Argoz looked between Bianca and the wreckage, then at Caleb, then at Evelyn. Then she grinned. "Oh," she said slowly. "You mean my people, as in fellow Chaos gremlins?" Bianca's eye twitched. Caleb coughed to hide a laugh. Evelyn just shook her head. "You're going to get stabbed." Bianca pointed at Argoz again. "Just keep cleaning." Argoz sighed dramatically, tossing her rag onto the table. "Fine, but I want it known that I'm an innocent bystander in all of this." Bianca ignored her. They were nearly finished when Rose walked in. Argoz barely had time to react before Rose's sharp gaze locked onto her. "Gunnar wants to see you," Rose said. Argoz stiffened. What?" Rose crossed her arms. "It's about the gem." "The gem?" Argoz felt her stomach twist. She glanced toward Caleb and Evelyn, who both shrugged. They didn't know any more than she did. Bianca, however, just gave her a look. "You better go," Bianca said, voice clipped, "before he has to come find you himself." Argoz winced. "Yeah, that sounded worse." With a sigh, she wiped her hands on her pants and followed Rose out of the mess hall. She had a very bad feeling about this. Argoz fidgeted the entire walk to the war room. Her fingers twitched toward the small pouch at her belt where the celestial gem rested, like she needed to reassure herself it was still there. She hadn't let it out of her sight since she'd stolen it. Rose walked ahead of her, silent, not offering any reassurance, just focused. Argoz hated when people were like that. It made her nervous. When they stepped into the war room, Gunnar was already waiting, arms crossed, his usual grim expression even more unreadable than usual. And he wasn't alone. Shade and Katrina were there. The moment they saw her, Argoz felt her instincts scream danger. Not because they were angry exactly, but because they were staring, like they'd just realized something important, like they were looking at her in a way no one ever had before. And Argoz did not like it. She stopped short. Okay. I feel like I just walked into an intervention. What's happening?" Gunnar's voice was flat. "You hold the key to their realm." Silence. Argoz blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Katrina took a slow step forward. "The celestial gem. It's not just an artifact." Shade nodded. "It's the key to Nythoria, and it's why Draven was able to enter our realm in the first place." Argoz's stomach dropped. Her hand twitched toward the pouch again. "Wait, you're telling me this thing actually means something?" "It means everything," Katrina said. "Draven had access to Nythoria because of it. The moment you stole it, that access was cut off." Argoz's breathing hitched. So that was why. That was why Draven's men had been after her. Why she'd been hunted. Why her entire life since that heist had turned into a nightmare. She rubbed a hand down her face. "Oh, I hate this." Shade exhaled. "Yeah." Argoz shook her head violently. No, what happens now? You taking it? Declaring it some kind of sacred relic and locking me up for stealing it? To her absolute shock, Katrina bowed, a precise, formal motion, one of respect. Argoz froze. What the hell?" Shade smirked. "In Nythoria, we honor those who carry the burden of something greater than themselves. Whether you knew it or not, you've been protecting our home." Argoz's mouth opened, then closed. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, half nerves, half disbelief. She scratched the back of her head. I don't know what to say. Rose smirked. For once. Argoz shot her a glare, then turned back to Shade and Katrina. So, what do we do about it? Gunnar finally spoke again. We figure out how to keep it safe. Because if Ravina or Draven get their hands on that gem again, it's over. Argoz exhaled, gripping the pouch tighter. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Then she smirked, a little of her usual confidence returning. Guess that means I'm a big deal now, huh? Shade chuckled. You always were, Argoz. You just didn't know it yet. For the first time since arriving at the workshop, Argoz felt it. She belonged here. The war room was silent save for the soft hum of the holographic table as the battle plan finalized before them. The air carried a tangible weight, a storm brewing just beyond the steel walls of Echo Division's stronghold. This wasn't just another mission. This was the moment before war. Gunnar stood at the head of the room, arms braced against the table, his single piercing blue eye sweeping across the gathered team. He had led men and women into hell before, but this time, it was different. They weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting to prevent a war from spilling over into every realm. Listen up. His voice was steady, commanding, absolute. This is our last chance to go over the plan before we deploy. We do this clean. We do this smart. We do this fast. The entire team sat around him, weapons at their sides, gear prepped, eyes hard. Shade and Katrina, silent spectres of the room, leaned against the far wall, their presence like ghosts before a storm. Rose, arms crossed, still fuming from earlier, but her rage had a purpose now. Darren, ever the wild card, was half listening, half smirking, but even he wasn't cracking jokes now. Lyra, seated across from Rose, was twirling a dagger between her fingers, but Gunnar knew she was listening to every single word. Eli stood beside the table, hands resting on a case filled with sleek black devices. She had been working non-stop on something special for the infiltration team. I've got something for you, Eli said, looking at Shade and Katrina. She popped the case open, revealing a row of matte black devices no bigger than a palm. They weren't traditional explosives, not the kind that could be seen anyway. Meet my latest little toys, she said with a grin. Shadow charges. Shade's eyebrow raised. Katrina stepped forward, eyeing them carefully. Based on the way you two phase in and out of the shadows, I figured, why not make something that does the same? Eli smirked. They don't go off immediately. You plant them, set the timer, and once they're active, they blend into the environment, invisible, undetectable. Once they go off, it's going to look like a sudden catastrophic failure. No one will know it was sabotage. Shade smirked in approval. Now that's my kind of explosive. Katrina gave a single nod of approval. Efficient, quiet, untraceable. Eli held up a single finger. Just remember, once you set them, the countdown starts. No wireless detonation, no turning them off. You set, you move, you disappear. Understood, Shade said, already pocketing a few. Katrina took hers, testing the weight before nodding. Gunnar exhaled, rubbing his temples for a moment before focusing back on the room. This was it. Infiltration team, he said, looking at Katrina, Shade, and Lyra. You go in first. No unnecessary fights. You plant the charges, get intel, and get the hell out. If you get made, you exfil. No heroics, no getting caught. His gaze hardened. I mean it. Katrina nodded. We move like ghosts. Shade gave a slow grin. I always do. Lyra shrugged. Not my first break-in, but sure, I'll behave. Gunnar's expression made it clear he wasn't amused. Then his gaze shifted. Defensive team. Rose, Darren, Eli, Clara, Desiree. You're holding down the fort. Ravina is coming, and when she does, we make sure she doesn't leave. Eli tapped the holographic screen, showing a glowing grid of defensive measures around the workshop. I've layered every inch of this place with security measures, she said. Magical wards, sensor drones, reinforced shielding, and a few nasty surprises. Clara crossed her arms. We need to assume she'll throw everything at us. Let her, Rose said, cracking her knuckles. I've been waiting for this. Gunner's eye flickered toward her, but said nothing. Lastly, his attention turned to the rear guard team. Ashley, Bianca, Jewel, Erendil, you'll hold Eldermire. It's your fallback point. If this goes to hell, you keep that portal open and make sure no one follows you out. Ashley slung her 240 Bravo machine gun over her shoulder, Beta beside her, carrying extra ammo pouches strapped to her vest. Don't worry, boss, Ashley said. We'll make sure nothing gets through unless we want it to. Everything was in place. Gunner looked at all of them. We deploy at 1900 hours. That gives you 6 hours to rest, gear up, and get your heads right. No screw-ups. No hesitation. This isn't just a mission. This is the start of something bigger. The room was silent. Darren let out a long exhale. Man, I really miss when our biggest problem was stopping a demon dragon from trying to eat me. Rose smirked, stretching. Oh, you'd get bored and you know it. Darren grinned. Yeah, probably. Eli snapped the case shut. All right, people, let's go win a war. Everyone stood splitting into their teams. Weapons were checked, armor adjusted. The wolves, Alpha, Omega, and Beta, moved silently among them, sensing the tension in the air. Lyra, before walking off, paused beside Shade, picking up one of the shadow charges. You sure you trust me with one of these? Shade's smirk was sharp. Number, but that's half the fun. Lyra grinned. As the team dispersed, Gunner stood at the table a moment longer, staring at the holographic map of the battlefield. The storm was here, and when it hit, there would be no turning back. He let out a breath. Then, in the silence of the war room, he muttered, Let's end this.